and you have to get books off of the shelf and you have to open them up and you have to oh, we're ready? Okay. Well, I'll quit stalling then. But the law school makes you do it the old-fashioned way so that if anything ever happens, you know how to use the library. And so we're ready, and I was going to make a joke about we're ready, and here comes Eddie, but I won't do that. But we're glad that Eddie's with us today. He's given us an avenue to work as a congregation in so many different places in the world and to have a real impact in the world. And he's done it with dignity and with honor and committed to the truth of God's word. And so we're grateful that he's here, and without any more, I'll turn it over to him.
I'm going to go about this a little bit different from the way I have done it in the past. As you recall, when I would come in the past, I would take the Bible class hour and talk to you about the work that we're doing. We are really emphasizing three big things in our work. Number one, we're trying to raise up preachers in 140 nations of the world. It's the largest attempt at this that our brotherhood is presently doing. Number two, we're trying to cover the earth from the standpoint of taking on 1/10 of the earth each year. Now we're trying to raise that to 2/10 of the earth each year. We're sending out the Life of Christ 1 and 2 that you may be studying here. We're sending about 5,000 boxes that would have 2 sets of that in those boxes, which would raise up teachers. So our goal for each 1/10 of the earth is to lead 5,000 to Christ across that 1/10 of the earth, and also to raise up 5,000 teachers who can continue to teach the life of Christ after that campaign ends. But we have divided up the earth into 10 parts, and we're doing our best to reach out to each of those 1/10 of the earth little by little. And then number 3, we're trying to build a classroom in the cloud that has all of our commentaries in that classroom, and we're trying to translate those commentaries into 22 languages beyond English. It's never been done before. It would give an opportunity for people literally around the world to be able to study through the Bible. So that's generally what we do. But I wanted to sort of illustrate what we do by telling you how the gospel started in the Ukraine. I will not be using the PowerPoint other than to have a slide here that tells you what I'm going to tell you, how the gospel went to the Ukraine. We did start the work in the Ukraine. Truth for Today started the work in the Ukraine, but we just started it. There were so many others who came around after we started it and participated in teaching those people the gospel. I was teaching a class at Harding, and I had a young man in that class whose name was Sergei Voronov. He was from right outside the Ukraine. He came up to me one day after class and he said, "Brother Clore, if you put some sermons on videos and provided those for me, I believe I could get those on Ukrainian television free of charge." I said, "Well, you're talking to the right person, because I really like to do all in that area that I can." I went to Dr. Burks and I asked him if I could have the TV studio, and he would allow me to put several sermons on videos. And I really had in mind that we would get those translated and would be able to put them on Ukrainian television in translated form, but we were not able to get them translated. But Dr. Burks was very happy for us to do it, and we fixed about 10 sermons on videotapes. And as the year progressed, that was in 1992, we began to make plans to go over there. Nobody had gone. There had been a few who had gone just to see what was going on. The walls came down in 1990, and we had to wait to see what was going to happen in regards to that. So it wasn't until 1993 that Sergei came to me in my Bible class. But anyway, by the time June had rolled around in 1993, we had thrown a lasso around 25 people who were going to go with us into the Ukraine. We'd never been into the Ukraine before. We didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't know how receptive the people might be, but we were going to try it. We found out about a brother, an elder in the church in Alabama by the name of Clifford Yeldale. We had heard that he had been over there, and he had gone through that area. And he believed that one of the best places to have a campaign would be Donetsk, Ukraine, which was a city of about 1 million people. So we called him and we said, would you go back over there for us, go ahead of us, and make sure we've got a place to stay whenever we get there? He said, I'll do it. So we sent him ahead of us. But whenever he got over there, he could not respond to us. He could not call us. They were just getting started on a number of things, and consequently, it would be hard to communicate to anybody outside of the Ukraine. So when we got on the plane, all 25 of us, we didn't know if we would have a place to stay when we got over there. But we went out not knowing where we were going. Everybody who got on the plane was very happy about the trip. They were bouncing with joy. Susan and I were biting our fingernails trying to figure out, will we have a place to stay when we get there? But we were able to rent a motel. We rented almost all of the motel. That was back during the days when you could get a room for about $12, and that included your food, 3 meals a day. And then we rented a building nearby. We could just walk to it. That would be a sort of an auditorium. It was an auditorium that would seat about 500 people. And out in front of that auditorium, there was a poster board. And people would regularly come by and look at that poster board and see what was taking place in that auditorium. Remember, this was way before the day of cell phones and other types of communication that you and I are used to using now. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we had decided that we were going to teach. When we hit the ground, we were going to be teaching. And we did not take any benevolence with us. Benevolence would have been helpful, but that would have been all we would get done, we thought, if we took benevolence with us, so we didn't take any. And we got there on Wednesday. We met Wednesday night, working out our plans on what we were going to do, and then we started our teaching on Thursday. I went down to the nearby television station, and we asked them if there would be a possibility that they could film the presentations at night and show them on Ukrainian television. We paid $300 per night, and they would come into the building and film the presentation, and then the next day they would show it at 9:30 in the morning and 7:30 at night. They told me that 6 million would be viewing the presentations that would be made. I didn't know how to extend the invitation. We didn't know if they understood what the invitation was, so we waited for about 3 or 4 nights before we extended the invitation. But each night before that, I would have 7 men that we really believed in. We thought they knew how to lead us all to Christ and would spend a lot of time making sure they were grounded in the faith. So as we came to the end of the service, I would have 7 men to stand up. They would stand up all over the little auditorium. And I would tell them, if you want a Bible study, you just go to any one of these men. They'll see that you get a Bible study. Well, they got enough Bible studies from that where they studied with people all day long and right on up to the service the next night. Well, the first night, we had about 120 to show up. The next night, we had about 250. And then the third night, we had around 500. And we leveled out at 500 for the entire 10 days that we were studying with these people. So about the fourth night, I had Chick Allison, whom you probably know. He's been in this part of the country. He's now deceased. But I told Chick, I want you to stand at the front when we get ready to extend the invitation. And you have your translator there beside you. And I'm going to invite the people, if they want to become Christians, to come down and let you know. And they'll communicate with you through your translator. And we have a swimming pool rented that's just down the way. And we'll take them over there and baptize them into Christ if you think they're ready to be baptized. I didn't know what was going to happen. But whenever I finished the sermon, and I finished it by going over in detail the way of salvation, I said, Chick Allison is here at the front with his translator, and if you want to be baptized, you come down and tell Chick what you want to do. They didn't know much English, but they had picked up the word baptize. They had the word baptize in their minds. And after we said amen and the service ended, there were 24 that came down and surrounded Chick, and all of them were saying, baptize, baptize, baptize. That's the only word they knew. Well, we took them over to the swimming pool, and we baptized them that evening. We had brought 3 sets of baptismal clothes for the women and 3 sets of the baptismal clothes for the men. We had no idea we were going to have 24 to respond the first night. So we just used the baptismal clothes over and over again. We thought it was a fluke. We thought maybe they don't understand. But we went about it the same way. The next night, about 20 responded then. And then the next night, 20. The next night, 20. And by the time the campaign ended, that would be in 10 days, we had baptized 124. So when the Sundays came, we were there for 2 Sundays. When the first Sunday came, we taught them how to worship. We said, now we want you to come. We rented a little place for them. It was the second floor of a theater, and they were to pay $15 a month for that meeting place. But it would be about the size of maybe one side of your auditorium if it didn't go all the way to the back. And that first Sunday, we had a number of people who had obeyed the gospel, and they filled that little auditorium. We were going to show them how to worship, and I was at the front, and others were at the front, and I mean every seat was filled, and it was just hard to move. And I was standing literally over in the corner, getting ready to say a few words to them, and there was a man who was right there at the front. He said, now, we've left the Greek Orthodox Church, and we believe we have become New Testament Christians. But he said, what do we do now? What are we, and what should we do? And I said, well, that's what we're going to tell you in the worship service that we're going to have. We had to show them how to observe the Lord's Supper. We had to show them how to sing. We had to figure out some way that we could sing something in Russian as well as in English. And we used our translators, of course, to help us in our praying and in our preaching. Well, at the end of that 10-day campaign, we had baptized 124 into Christ. One new congregation was established. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I've never seen people respond so readily to the gospel. I think that the Ukrainians had hearts that were just open, just totally open. They did not have Bibles, but they believed in God. They knew they needed to do something. They wanted somebody to tell them what to do. We brought several Bibles with us, and they received those Bibles with joy. I've never seen people so excited about getting a Bible as they were. They didn't want one. They wanted 4 and 5. They wanted to give Bibles to their friends and to their relatives who did not have them. When we came back to America, those of us who could met in the airport in Chicago. And we said to one another, somebody is going to have to go back. We've left too many baby Christians. We had taken 2 men, and we had sort of dealt with them, helping them to be ready to preach. We figured that it'd take us 2 weeks to get back over there. So we had 2 men lined up to preach. We went over the sermon with them. We helped them with the sermon. We got them ready. But we said, really, they don't need to be 2 weeks by themselves. Somebody's going to need to go back. And one man raised his hand and he said, if you'll give me 1 week, I've got some things I need to take care of, and then I'll be on my way back. And they'll only have to worship one Sunday without some of us being with them to encourage them. And another man spoke up and he said, now, I haven't said anything to my wife about this, but when I get home, I'm going to talk to her about it. And if she's willing, we'll go back over there and spend a couple of years. We know this is the time to go. We know that those people are ready to receive the gospel, and we want to do what we can. Well, that man got back over there in 1 week. And then that man talked to his wife, and she was willing, so they went back over to stay for 2 years, and I believe they completed the 2 years. But he talked to a veterinarian who was a friend of his, and he said, you need to go with me. Well, he said, I've got my business. I've got my veterinarian work that I'm doing. He said, listen, this is the time to put it on hold. And you come and go with me and stay for 2 years. There are some times in the life of the church, we don't always recognize those times when the door is wide open. And that's the time when we need to lay down what we're doing and we need to go and give them the gospel. So they went back, and we met in August in our living room. J.L. May was in on that meeting. Chick Allison was in on that meeting. We have a number of us that gathered together, and we said, you know, we've got to go back. And this time, we've got to do far more than we did last time. We just had 1 campaign last time. This time, we need to have 5 campaigns, because our campaign ability could not keep up with the TV ability. The TV was reaching out to people in the regions, and they were hearing the gospel, and they were sending word to us. We've heard your presentations. We believe you preach the truth to us, and we want you to come out and see us. Well, we couldn't get to all the places. We got to some of the places, but we couldn't get to all of the places. So we decided that the next year we would have 5 campaigns, and one thing led to another. And eventually we put together 11 campaigns simultaneously. It was the largest campaign that our brotherhood has had in that region or any other place, so far as I know. And we had a preacher, and we had a campaign director for each campaign, and we were going to take on the big city of Donetsk. It was about 1 million in population. They didn't use cars. They used public transportation to get around, and most of them would walk. So we wanted to have a campaign in every part of that big city of Donetsk, where anybody in the city who wanted to could make his way to a campaign site. Susan, my wife, and I, and our 2 children went over 3 weeks in advance, where we could get every campaign site ready to go. We wanted to make sure that whenever those campaigners got there, there were 204 of them who were coming. Whenever they got there, we wanted to introduce them to their campaign site and make sure that all of the people in the city knew about those campaigns and would come out to hear the preaching. Neil Pryor, one of our teachers at Harding, went. And we had 11 preachers who went, each of them preaching in one of the campaigns. We went on for 10 days. We had raised $250,000 worth of benevolence. But we soon found out that if we deal with benevolence, we're not going to have time to preach. They would line up at our door at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we just gave the benevolence over to a group and said, you handle that and let us do the preaching and teaching. We were conducting hundreds of Bible studies. All day long we were conducting Bible studies. And then we had the preaching at night. And in some places the preaching was televised. And we just preached and taught for 10 days. We rented a large swimming pool, this time larger than what we had before, and the people began to respond. I had recruited a couple to go. And the wife said, well, what shall I do? I said, you'll teach. We'll have 30 women for you to teach. We'll give you a woman's class and you can teach them. Well, she said, what should I study with them? Well, study with them Ruth and Esther and Mary and Hannah and the great women of the Bible. That's always a winner. So she said, okay, I can do that. So she did. She worked up her lessons. And whenever the campaign started, I didn't see all of them each day, but every once in a while we would be together where we could sort of compare notes. And I saw her, and I said, well, how's your class going? Well, she said, good. We've got maybe 30 women in the class. And I said, well, how are your studies going? She said, not so very good. I said, what do you mean? What are you studying with them? Well, I'm going through Ruth and Esther and Hannah. And I said, well, why isn't that going well? She said, they don't want to know about Ruth. They don't want to know about Esther. They want to know the way of salvation. They were ready. Their hearts were open. It was one of the most unusual times that I've ever seen. So we began to baptize people. In all the campaigns, we were baptizing people. And we told them, now listen, you've obeyed the gospel, and we want to meet with you one final time before we leave, and that would be on Sunday afternoon. We want all the new converts to come together and meet with us. And we'll try to encourage you before we leave, before we go out of town. Everybody was baptizing people in all of the campaigns. And I would go by that swimming pool during the day, and they were lined up in the water, waiting their turn to be baptized. I know, it sounds like it's unreal that it would be a fluke. But on that last Sunday afternoon, we were going to have all of the preachers up at the front, and they would speak to that big congregation for only 2 minutes and say something like, you need to study your Bible. We've given you a Bible, you need to study. And another would say, you need to pray. But all 11 men would have 2 minutes in order to say something to them about it. Otherwise, the service would have been too long. The Linen Palace, where we gathered, would seat 1,200. And there's an empty seat here or there. I was going to show you a picture of it, but we're not going to be able to do that. And when we came down to the last man, he didn't have much to say. Everybody had covered everything that he wanted to say. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He said, there's one song that we have sung every night during this campaign. God is so good. I'd start my sermon with that song. And the sermons that we had televised, we would start with that song. And he said, I think you know it. I think you know it in Russian, and we know it in English. We think that we had 1,000 people in that assembly. Now, during the 10 days, we had baptized 1,545. We didn't get them all in that assembly. I was going to show you a picture of that assembly. It's unbelievable. And this brother said, I want us to sing together. You sing it in Russian, we'll sing it in English. God is so good. And so I have a picture of this vast assembly of new converts, people who had obeyed the gospel, during that campaign. Most of them during this campaign, some of them in the previous campaign. But they had obeyed the gospel and they were singing. All of them singing, God is so good.
It worked. You just have to click the clicker.
Okay. If you can get it up on there, at least they can see the picture. Yeah.
Just click that little arrow right there.
Okay, all right. That's the first campaign. This is the second campaign, the 11 campaigns simultaneously. 1,545 conversions, 7 churches were established. There were actually 11 churches established, but we combined 2 or 3 of them, came out with 7. You can't hear it. I didn't get that set up right. I've never seen anything like it. New converts all over that auditorium singing, God is so good. They're singing in Russian, we're singing in English. You know, it was one of those moments in time where you just wish you could go into a room and bawl. I've never seen anything like it. And right after this, we got on the bus and the train and went out of there. It was about a 15-hour bus ride or 15-hour train ride going out of there. This was one of our campaign directors there in the black. Clifton Yeldale, I think, is standing right there. You'll see some of them that will have a little sticker on their clothes, and that would be a campaign worker. But the others are people who have just been baptized into Christ. Very sincere people, very devoted to finding out the way of salvation. I don't know how to stop this. There we go. I'll stop it like that since you can't hear it. But I wanted you to see that. Anyway, I had raised the money for 22 people to stay and help these new congregations get on the right foot as they started off in their work. Then in 1995, now that second campaign was in 1994. In 1995, we set up a translation center there in Donetsk. We wanted to translate these issues that we send out. We send out around 31,000 every month. We wanted to send this out in Russian. Go out every month all over, really, the Ukraine. When it got started, it was going out all over the Ukraine. And you can see we were sending out 60,000 books per year. That was 5,000 per month. And then over 19 years, we had sent out over 1 million of them. A pretty good sized book. It doesn't have everything in it, but when you don't have anything, this was really meaningful to them. We got our translation center going with a fine lady, a very fine translator, and she stayed with us all during this. We haven't been able to contact her in the last month, but she's still in the Ukraine, still alive. She has sent us an email or two, but we haven't heard from her in the last month. The translator who has taken over that work is also a woman. She's got a PhD degree in communication. She did her dissertation in Ukrainian. There are two languages here. There's the Russian language, and many people who just know Russian cannot speak Ukrainian. There's that much of a difference between the two languages. And then there are those who speak Ukrainian who cannot speak Russian. So we're busily engaged in trying to translate in the two languages. I think my time is up. Is that right? Is the bell ringing? Anyway, I wanted to show you. Let me get on down here. Well, this was the beginning of the work in the Ukraine. And what it did, campaigns like this will do things you're not even aware it's going to do. One thing that it did was to alert the brotherhood that the campaign people were really open and they were really ready to receive it. And so everybody started going into the Ukraine. Every preacher in the country started going over into the Ukraine. And as you see on television, these cities that are being bombed, every city had a church of the Lord in it. And many of those people that you see fleeing would be members of the church. So we've tried to get as many Bibles as we could outside of the Ukraine into Poland and all of the surrounding nations where